I want to move to our final keynote. I hope you've had a really nice day and a nice 2 days at our conference. One of the things I've been most excited about is to be able to end with a really exciting speaker. So I want to make this about Denver and about PBS. So we called the president and CEO of Rocky Mountain PBS, Doug Price, and graciously asked him if he'd be willing to come along and do the introduction for Paula. And a little bit about Rocky Mountain PBS. They have a 60-year tenure, and the network began in Denver in 1956 as Colorado's first public television station and is Colorado's only statewide television network. Doug has been with Rocky Mountain PBS since 2009 after a successful career leading First Bank Holding Company. He is the founding chairman of a highly accomplished child care nonprofit organization, and I can tell you, having had lunch and spoken with him, he is fiercely passionate about early childhood and the impact it has on children and in schools, and he's extremely active in the public policy landscape in the state of Colorado and across the country. So please help me in welcoming Doug Price.
Whatever you do, be raucous, because this is being live streamed nationwide on Facebook. So you see Alexa down here. If you go to Twitter and get at RMPBS Doug, it'll direct you how to get to Facebook. So it's always fun to do that. I have to think about this for a moment, what you have introducing. You have an overweight, over 60 white man with bad hair and no political acumen introducing one of America's most powerful women. What could possibly go wrong? I am Doug Price. I am the CEO of Rocky Mountain PBS. They didn't say the name, but I was the founder of Qualistar Early Learning, which was the quality ratings improvement system in the United States. The reason I say that is that ECS played a significant role in that. When you're working with ECS as AEP does, this opportunity to have resonance for what you do that is far greater than you deserve is something that can occur. So I'm delighted to be part of that, and I'm proud to serve the people of Colorado. If you think about our role in the national public media system, our mission is to educate, inspire, and entertain people from all walks of life. And at the helm, almost 2 years longer than me, but at the helm of the national system since I began has been Paula Kerger, who's the president and CEO of PBS, which is the nation's largest non-commercial media organization with 350 member stations throughout the country. And so what we're always fond of saying is that we're not the nonprofit branch of media. We're the media branch of the nonprofit community. Our view is to serve those who are not served by media. We are not in the affirmation business of selling to an audience. We're in the information business of creating benefit to the democracy. So there's a profound difference between what we do and what they do. But to make this about Paula, I think it's interesting. How many of you watched Saturday Night Live the other night? Funny. But my favorite piece was one that might have gone right by you, is when they introduced Lin-Manuel Miranda from Hamilton as the PBS house rapper. And that told you everything you needed to know about the tenure of Paula at PBS. She's brought America some truly wonderful programming, such as Downton Abbey on Masterpiece, Ken Burns' The Roosevelts, and I think for all of us, the acclaimed children's series like Curious George and Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. Of course, you can, the Fred Rogers Group put together Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. They have a new project coming out this fall as well. So just to name a few, I want you to think about this. In the course of the year, 82% of all households in the United States watch PBS, and over 70% of all children watch PBS. Right? If you think about the audience you want to reach, in Denver, Colorado, on Rocky Mountain PBS, 87% of Latino families access us in a year. And that's a really important feature because that is not true in a highly stratified media environment, in a highly polarized political environment, to have institutions like PBS that attract all people are really essential. So since her arrival, Paula has made a strong commitment to education, to public affairs, the use of new technologies to reach people, and importantly, the arts. Now, I would say this about Paula and I. We're kind of the odd couple of PBS. I mean, she's classy and I'm trashy. She worked for the opera when I was a money-grubbing bank president. We've been known to fight like Felix and Oscar on the couch in our New York apartment, or maybe even better, Jackie Gleason and Audrey Meadows in The Honeymooners, for those of you old enough to know that. And only in this case, it's occasionally Paula who's been saying, "To the moon, Doug Price, to the moon." So I've been known to get in trouble with her. She's been known to get in trouble with me. But during the course of our friendship, which is now 8 years, the thing that's marked it was this fierce advocacy for the arts on her part. Her passion about giving all Americans exposure to great art. And that's something I learned from her very early, and something that Rocky Mountain PBS is committed to at this point. And that's one of the reasons this is such an important gathering for us. So when you look at her personal biography, you can see that the arts have always been there during her time at the Metropolitan Opera in New York, and later when she worked at WNET. I hope you can tell us more about this particular issue. Before I ask Paula to join me on the stage, we've got a little video to share with you. Please join me and the PBS audience on Facebook in welcoming Paula Kerger.
That was hopefully giving you a taste of what we have in store for you for just this coming year. I'm really happy to be here and grateful to Jane and the Arts Education Partnership for inviting me to be here today to talk about something that I'm truly passionate about. And I am so glad that my friend and colleague, Doug Price, was able to be here and could do that introduction. It's really appropriate that Doug introduced me, because not only is he the CEO of Rocky Mountain PBS here in Denver, but he truly does share my commitment to bringing the very best work in the performing and visual arts to every corner of this country. But he's also so passionate about education, which really does make him an ideal partner. I think these two themes of arts and education are the most important aspects of the work that we do. And I'm grateful that you hung in for the end of this meeting. I'll try not to let you down. I did bring a lot of video to share with you. The room's kind of warm. The rest of this hotel, not so much. This has already been a great trip for me. I got to stay in the Spice Girls suite last night. I can check that off of my list of to-dos for sure. But anyway, it's, we have 350 member stations across the country, including the wonderful Rocky Mountain PBS. And in fact, the heart and soul of public broadcasting is in the community. We are very different than any other media organization or broadcaster because we're inherently local. We're not top-down. I think the best way to describe who we are is to understand that those 350 stations do not report to me. I report to them. I've often been called as having the ultimate cat herder job. And it does make work interesting, especially during periods of such radical change as the times that we live in today. But ultimately, I think it results in media that truly meets the needs of those we serve. Who better to make decisions about what work is produced than people that are living in communities? Who better to be partners with community organizations than people that work alongside of you? And so that, I think, is really at the heart of who we are and what we do. And I think that our work, really does come to life in community, where we engage and connect with the public. I spend a lot of time out on the road. We were swapping road warrior stories in the green room before we came out. And for me, it's, travel isn't so fun. But I do love the opportunity. In fact, it is the best part of the job, being out and visiting with stations and speaking to people across the country on a range of various subjects. But I meet community leaders, I meet people that are engaged with our stations, I meet a lot of teachers, because so much of our work is done in education. I speak at chambers of commerce and so forth. And the one constant, I would say, no matter where I go across the country, is I cannot think of a community where people have not made a point of talking to me about the great art that is created there. I think people are so proud of the fact that art truly does define community. And I think that as I look at our work at PBS, and I think about it as compared to the work that we've done over the last 50 years, I think the one true line for us is that the arts have really been central to our mission. And I am looking, as we anticipate the next years ahead, to try to figure out how to deepen that. And so that's why the opportunity to come here today and talk to you about the work that you are trying to accomplish at the community level in really building arts education in this country is so profoundly important, and we would love to be your partner in that. I think that, we do share so many similarities. Our job, like you, is to enrich people's lives, and I think it is our collective responsibility that we build the communities in which we want to live, and the arts very much need to be a part of that. I have come to this feeling based on a lifetime of experience, because the arts have been very important to me before my time at the Metropolitan Opera, in fact, and I was there in very much a non-singing role. But I did also work for 10 years at WNET, which is our public television station in New York, which is the home of such series as Great Performances and American Masters and Live from Lincoln Center. So, my work over these last more than 25 years has been really centered around arts work. But if I really think about the arts in my life, it goes back to my childhood. I grew up outside of Baltimore in an area that was relatively rural, and we would, in fact, my aunt was an art teacher, and we would occasionally, go into town, sometimes to Baltimore, sometimes to Washington, to go to museums or to see performances, but those were rather rare occasions. However, I did have the great fortune of attending good public school, of which arts and music was very much a part of the curriculum and was very much a part of my life. I spent time in chorus, I spent time in band, I did a little work in theater, and for me, it was tremendously important. But my first exposure to the arts was in television. And there was a time when you could see great theater and great dance on commercial television. Remember the Ed Sullivan Show? You had people like Maria Callas, as well as the Beatles, as well as Popo Gigio. And I remember as a little girl seeing ballet for the first time on television, Nutcracker, which I think is probably the first dance experience for many children. Mine was on television with Edward Villelas, and I'm dating myself. But that was, many of those experiences that I enjoyed were on public television. That was really sort of my first experience. And I think since then, times have changed considerably. I don't need to talk to you about the change in arts education in public schools. I do feel very fortunate. And I remember some of my great experiences when I was really little, were the art and music classes that I took beginning in the first grade, and I think about, again, all of these programs that I watched on television, And I think that, for many, those experiences just don't exist anymore, with the exception of the competition shows, where I think the arts are very much still present on commercial television, which is why when I became the president of PBS, we really began to double down and think about how could we increase the reach and the quality and the substance of the work that we do on television. Now, granted, children do have different experiences than we had growing up, in that they have access to the internet and places like YouTube where there is material there for them to enjoy. But I think it's important for all of us in this room to remember that while some of you may be watching on Facebook Live, there are a tremendous number of people in this country who don't have access on a regular basis to broadband. And so, although many of us always think about the riches that are available in all of these different places, it is not equally applied across the country. And those of us that are in service, every one of us in this room, I think really needs to pay attention to what content people can actually be exposed to and enjoy and consume, and how we think about closing those gaps. Last year, the Pew Research Center found that 5 million households with school-age children do not have high-speed internet at home. And among the lowest income households, roughly 1/3 lacks that connection. I don't know how many of you remember there was a front page story in the New York Times a few months ago, and there was a photograph of 2 children who were standing out on the street trying to get broadband from their school to do their homework. And they had their smartphones there because that was their computer device, but the only way they could get the broadband was standing outside the school so that they were trying to pick up the service there. And to me, that was such a powerful visual and a reminder that this really does represent an enormous gap. So I think that the scaling back of arts in the school and the limiting of broadband access really does even more greatly increase what I think of as an arts gap in this country. And I think this is particularly unfortunate because we all know, every person in this room knows that exposure to the arts creates emotional, intellectual, and behavioral enrichment for children. As Albert Einstein so aptly said, education is not the learning of facts, but the training of the mind. And I can think of no better training than a full and rich introduction to the arts. Art nourishes the spirit, it strengthens the intellect, and when art comes into a child's life in their formative years, that child is better equipped to navigate the world that awaits them. That is why I was so pleased that you invited me here, because I want the opportunity to say to you that I think that your work is so pivotal and so critical, and we want to do everything that we can to support it. I appreciate all that you do, both individually and collectively, as part of this partnership to keep the arts alive for today's children and for generations to come. Now, you won't be surprised to hear that I believe public television has a role to play here. Our member stations are natural partners in making the arts accessible to children and to give kids a space where they can create an experience. Today, 99% of homes in this country have access to public broadcasting. You know, for many children, especially low-income and underserved children, public television is, in fact, their only window to the world. People are surprised at how many people, in fact, rely on good old-fashioned, over-the-air television as their sole source for information. It may be the only place where they can learn about the environment around them, particularly for the little ones before starting preschool or kindergarten. It may be the only place where they can get the skills for a jump start on life, and it may be the only place that gives them that first early exposure to the arts. We're committed to using our reach, working with you, to inspire, educate, and entertain viewers of all ages with exceptional arts programming. We like to say that we offer the nation's largest stage where anyone and everyone can have a front row seat, no matter where you live or what your economic means, to some of the greatest performances of our time. Last year, more than 100 million people tuned in for nearly 600 hours of arts and culture programming. And more important, those numbers, in fact, are the stories behind them. Now, a few years ago, I had the great pleasure of meeting a lead dancer with the San Francisco Ballet, and I'd like to share with you his story. So if you could, roll the first clip.
When I was 12 years old, I was watching great performances on PBS. This program with Nureyev came on. Nureyev in a performance of Le Corsaire, and I was amazed and awestruck. I really wanted to do it. I was street dancing at the time, and I never thought of formal dance until I saw great performances. I knew that I was really a novice to dance, like high dance. I decided to check out the high school performing arts. And so one thing led to the next. Today, as a recognized dancer, I absolutely believe that when I saw the performance, it affected me tremendously. And I know that's what happens when I teach. I'm opening an option for them that they hadn't seen before.
Most important piece. One experience obviously changed his life. What was the last thing he said? When I teach. Because that's what he does now. He's a dance teacher. I think that there are countless stories like Dedsman's, people whose passions were ignited after that first exposure to the arts. Not every child is going to grow up to dance in a company, and not every child will go on to perform on the stage, but all children share that curiosity and potential for learning that is sparked when they come into contact with the arts. I really do believe that this is something that is so profoundly important, and particularly in this time. Daniel Pink once said, "The keys to the kingdom are changing hands." He argues that the future belongs to a different kind of worker for the future, including inventors, designers, and big picture thinkers. And so as he charges us to think about, as we're preparing that next generation for the world that they will inherit, what he's actually describing, inventors, designers, big picture thinkers, he's describing people that think like artists, harnessing imaginations to solve the big problems of the future. So it's clear in these changing times that the kind of innovation that's always been represented in the arts and artistic thought is more important than ever. And so I think that it is tremendously important as we look at educational arts and music programming and look to see what we can do to expand that work in the school system, that we want to be your partner in that effort. In the meantime, looking for ways to elevate the arts throughout the resources we provide to teachers and students in the classroom. At PBS, an arm of our organization is devoted to help digital learning resources and to put them in the hands of teachers to help engage and inspire kids. Teachers across subject matters use the material, and they often look at ways that they can incorporate the arts into that work. As just one example, Rocky Mountain PBS presents a weekly program called Arts District, which captures the best of the arts here in Colorado and nationally, and many teachers end up using those segments as learning aids. I encourage all of you to, if you're not already doing it, to talk to your local stations, to look at ways that they can help you connect some of that work directly into schools. We like to think of ourselves as a megaphone for some of the great work that's happening in community, and that's what we've tried to do through broadcast, and we're very specifically focused on it in the classroom. For years, teachers have used our videotapes and other material in the classroom, but a few years ago, we started a project called PBS Learning Media, which is, in essence, using broadband to deliver content into the classroom. And we're taking some of our material as well as taking the material that organizations like yours are producing. We work with a lot of partners, including Smithsonian, National Archives, organizations like NASA. And at the community level, many people are working with museums and others to put digitized objects and video into form that teachers can easily use and navigate through. We also point back to you because we know you have deep riches, and we want to be able to help people find the wide array of material that you have. But we have found that even with our own content, people love Ken Burns, but they don't want to use 24 hours of, his latest documentary in the classroom. But if you can find that right 3-minute piece, it can be quite engaging and inspiring. And kids are surrounded by media, and they come into the classroom, and I think it is a tremendously powerful tool, but I think particularly for the arts. We do a wonderful series called Art 21, which is as much about creativity as it is about the work in contemporary art. And I know that series is heavily used in the classroom for the same reasons. It's segmented, very small pieces. You can set up a piece, and then you can engage a conversation. We're used by 1.5 million teachers across the country. And we are specifically right now focused on increasing our work in the arts. And by connecting in with your local station, you're also contributing into a national archive so that the work of your organization can truly reach across the country. And I think that as we work with teachers, the one thing that we hear most frequently is in addition to being resource challenged, even more so they're time challenged. And so the easier that we can make it to find this work, which is, by the way, organized by grade level, by content, and then correlated against standards, it just makes it so much easier for teachers to be able to pluck something out and to be able to use it, and by extension, extend that work into the classroom. As children of all ages are increasingly looking at various digital platforms, we've also extended our work through apps and the web. We started to look very carefully a few years ago at YouTube, where there are opportunities, particularly in reaching a lot of slightly older children. And we started a project called PBS Digital Studios, where we reached out not to PBS producers or television producers, but people who were working in YouTube, who I believe 15 years ago would have been working in public television, people that were doing work that looked very similar to some of the ideas that we were thinking about. And we started to compile series under that brand. We have millions of subscribers to the service, and we've done some specific work in the arts, one of which I just want to share with you. It's a studio's project called The Art Assignment. Sarah Green, for those of you who know the Greens, who've done a lot of work in YouTube, has done this one, and it really gives kids a sense of art. Usually in these segments, I'm only going to show you very quick, she actually sends people out into community as part of the piece. It has a very large audience of older kids that are watching on a regular basis, and this will give you just a brief taste of what we're doing in this space. Roll the clip.
So you see a few cubes sitting in an art gallery and you think to yourself, this is the greatest hoax that anyone has ever pulled off. You immediately walk away, discouraged by the wide gulf between what you hope for when you walk into a museum and what they've presented to you. How did we get here? How could these cubes that the artist didn't even make with their own hands be important? This is the case for minimalism. First off, we're not talking about minimalism as a general sensibility or the life-changing magic of tidying up. We're talking about the art of a particular moment in time, namely the 1960s, when all of a sudden there was a lot of geometric abstract art. Some of it was painting by artists like Frank Stella and Ellsworth Kelly, but most of it was sculpture by artists like Donald Judd, Carl Andre, Dan Flavin, Ann Truitt, Robert Morris, Tony Smith, Ronald Bladen, and Sol LeWitt. Art critics called it ABC art, object art, primary structures, and cool art, but the term minimalism prevailed. These artists never called their art minimalist, by the way, nor did they like the term, or the implication that the work was so reductive that it was minimally art. But minimalism was a rejection of what came before, specifically abstract expressionism, which dominated the art market in the 1950s.
This is, by the way, the most engaged audience of all of our shows on YouTube. Fans send in their own art assignment on Tumblr and Instagram and exchange art with one another at the annual VidCon conference. Now, for our youngest audiences, we look at incorporating arts content into our broadcast programming. One of our newer series is called Peg Plus Cat, which is an animated math-based series for children ages 3 to 5, and it follows a wonderful young girl, Peg, and her sidekick, Cat, as they embark on adventures and solve problems together. In addition to the show being available on PBS stations, we make Peg Plus Cat available to early learning educators. It's proven to be an engaging tool in the classroom. We firmly embrace STEAM, and we have for years. We know that incorporating math, and particularly music, into children's programming dramatically increases the learning that occurs and the stickiness of that content. So here's a clip from an upcoming episode called The Dance Problem, which features a voiceover by someone whose voice you may not recognize, but whose work you certainly do, Misty Copeland. Please run the clip.
Misty Copeland! Okay, so now we're going to do the 5 basic positions that you use all the time in ballet. They are First, second, third position, fourth, and fifth position.
First, second, third position, fourth, and collision!
Now dream, lead, hope, land.
Just like Misty Copeland!
All right, so I've got to go early today because I'm off to dance Odette in Swan Lake, which is like the coolest role ever. Wish me luck. And remember, dream big. You can do anything.
One mother has this to say about Peg plus Cat. She said this on Facebook. My 7-year-old can talk knowledgeably about three-dimension, Beethoven, George Washington, Rube Goldberg machines, Hanukkah, lines of symmetry, chicks, the magic flute, Einstein, just to name a few. I love working in public television. Music, dance, and great storytelling are the hooks that engage kids and draw them in, which brings me to my next point. In addition to making the arts accessible, we have to look at ways to make it relevant. We learned a long time ago that simply because we build it doesn't necessarily mean they will come. Kids in particular are very judicious in their viewing decisions, and believe me, they control the devices, and if it's not something they enjoy and watch, they turn the channel. Or they turn off their devices. You know, one current project that comes to mind that I think has really done an exceptional job of blending art and history and creativity together is a little musical that a few of you may have heard of, Hamilton. This October, it will kick off our Fall Arts Festival, and our member stations will give viewers a behind-the-scenes look at the making of this musical. Now, I'm going to brag for a few minutes because I'm so proud of the fact that we are bringing this documentary forward. We worked with Lin-Manuel Miranda on his last project, In the Heights, and so when he started working on this, what seemed incredibly unusual hip-hop musical about Hamilton, we were actually there with a filmmaker documenting the process. And this, I think, will give you just a tiny sense of the premiere later this month. Roll the clip.
New York, you can be a new man. In New York, you can be a new man. In New York, just you
Hamilton's America is really like nothing you've seen before. It's the story of Alexander Hamilton's life as filtered through the musical and the journeys of the actors and creative team that brought it to Broadway. You know, Alex Horwitz started running a camera on me before we even knew we were going to Broadway.
Pretty early on, I said to him, you don't know exactly what you're making. He said he wasn't sure if it was a concept album or a show. I said, I don't care, but I'd like to start filming the process. Wherever you end up, I think we've got a story here. We use Lin and the journey of his show as the lens through which we tell that same history that he does in the Richard Rodgers Theater.
What I think you get from the film is how Lin takes this history and figures out how to make drama out of it.
So what did I miss?
I really hope that viewers watching this learn a lot of history, and that helps them feel even closer to Hamilton, our musical.
That distant history of ours is actually not so far removed as we think.
This is a great way of seeing how Hamilton meets the world. Hamilton was a real person, and the founding of our country is an incredible story.
What's your name, man? Alexander Hamilton.
This, I think, is truly a once-in-a-generation gift, this show, and I think the power of it is extraordinary, particularly for educators. One of my colleagues has 2 young daughters who are absolutely obsessed with Hamilton, like so many children are across the country. Her girls are 7 and 9, so they've only been aware of one president, in their lifetime. And so as a family, they've been talking a lot about this year's election. And her daughters have already started to anticipate the transition of power to a new president, which is such a critical part of this storyline. I think that there aren't many theatrical performances which make term limits a topic of eager conversation among grade schoolers. But I think the show connects our nation's history to the present, and it helps kids understand in a very fresh way the roots of our democracy, and also the fact that it is our collective story, not just the story of some odd-looking older white men. And I think that this is a huge gift. And so as we worked with Lin-Manuel on this project from the very beginning, we looked at ways that we could bring it into the classroom. So in partnership with WNET, my former home, we're assembling an entire multimedia curriculum to include lesson plans that will connect directly to videos from the documentary, and we're bringing Hamilton into the community. So Here in Denver, Rocky Mountain PBS is teaming up with the Jefferson County Public Library Teen Advisory Board to give students a sneak peek at a special screening they're doing on the 19th at Green Mountain High School for the Performing Arts. A colleague recently told me that even Kelly Ripa suggested that Hamilton has been such a great teaching tool, so we should have Lin-Manuel make Algebra the musical. Even though he is a prolific and creative genius, Lin-Manuel cannot be expected to produce musicals that span the entire academic curriculum, but instead, we draw lessons from this that can be applied across our work. The potential for drama and storytelling to bring new light to important moments in our history, the power of music to engage audiences, and the promise of art to bring people together. When I see how people from all walks of life relate to a musical like Hamilton, it reinforces my optimism for the future of the arts in America. As you know, the National Endowment for the Arts tracks public participation in the arts, and while overall participation in what they call benchmark activities has fallen slightly in recent years, there are signs of a renaissance. Just over half of all American adults attended a live visual or performing arts activity in 2012. But even more important, people are connecting to the arts in new ways. More than 7 in 10 used electronic media to watch or listen to art. 44% created, practiced, performed, edited, or remixed art, 44%. And I think that new technologies and new platforms are giving us ways to reach audiences, particularly children. The cost barrier to produce and create something yourself has dropped to such a level. One of the art assignment clips I did not show you is all about the selfie, which you may laugh and chuckle and think, oh, that's silly, and really connecting it to self-portraiture. And so I think there's a lot that we should open our eyes to pay attention to and think about as we look at ways to bring the arts to more and more people. Of course, I love to hear stories like Desmond's, but more often I think about children who haven't yet seen a dance performance, who haven't yet discovered the joy of music. And I reflect on the impact that the arts has had on my own life. Without that, I wouldn't be standing here today. I think my life would certainly would be less fulfilling. And I think at no time in our history has there been a greater need to restore and reinvigorate public engagement with the arts. During this time of great divisiveness, when people seem intent on isolating themselves from anyone who may be different, I think of nothing more important in building bridges between us than the arts, which help us recognize our common humanity. The arts transport and transform us. They open us up to new worlds and new ways of thinking. They excite and inspire us. Our jobs, yours and mine, is to make sure that the arts remain a robust and vibrant part of our children's education. We do that by reaching children through every way that we can and through every possible channel and platform. We do that by continuing to show our country's leaders the hard evidence that the arts improve lives, boost our economy, and strengthen our long-term outlook. And we do that by holding up stories like Desmond's to show what's possible. Now, as I look across this room and I think about what happens after this election, I think our country could go down two very different paths. I think that all of the tension of this election can continue and we can further splinter, or we can use this moment after the election to try to come together as a country. And I feel one of the ways that we can do that, not to add yet another burden to the many that you carry, is to figure out how to really bring the arts more to a central place in our society and our communities. Because I do think that the arts is that one place where we truly can unite. And if we do that, I think we have a true opportunity of really building the country that we believe in. And I just want to thank you again for inviting me to be here and to let you know that I am so very grateful for everything that you are doing and anything that we can do to partner with you to help you achieve your work. We're there. Thank you so very much.
So, as a self-proclaimed ultimate cat herder, Paula, we are very grateful for you to join us as a champion for the arts and education. With lack of that much more to say, before I get to the That's All Folks portion of the agenda, I just want to thank everyone for making the journey to Colorado and to Denver, and we hope you found this conference to be a valuable one as you explored various aspects of research, practice, and policy related to arts education. And I hope you feel inspired as we all move toward moving the needle on our collective goals for the arts and education, because I truly believe that this community, you all here today, are the ones that are going to be at the front of the line moving the needle to ensure that all children have quality arts programs as part of their educational experiences. So please enjoy the rest of your day. Those of you who are traveling home today, we appreciate your time, and we hope you have safe travels and efficient travels home. And just so you have on your calendar, our symposium will take place in Washington, D.C. on March 18th. Thanks, and have a good afternoon.